Hey Tim, how's it going?
Hey, Rebecca, it's great. How are you?
Super good. Thanks for being on. You're the third gentleman that we've had on the Badass Women's Council podcast.
Well, I am absolutely honored and feel fortunate to be able to, share some time with you and
Awesome.
maybe get in Courtney Simkis's in club here.
I don't know. It's a pretty the membership is pretty rigorous. We'll consider it though. How's that?
Uh, I'll take a role as an intern or carrying equipment bags or something. Yeah.
So Courtney Simkis is your Chief Growth Officer and has been a member of the Rise and Thrive experience, and it's been amazing. I'd love for you, let's just share that story. So when you hired Courtney, one of the first directives you gave as her leader was go find your people. I love that. Why was that important to you?
Yeah, I think it's that you can't figure all this stuff out on your own. So getting the ideas from others out there and learning from them, but also to have like a safe place to go to, totally undress and let it all out and be okay with it and know that people are still going to accept you no matter what. And when you get really, get real, that's when the magic really happens. And that's when you can really get to the core of the issues you're having. And if I think I find out a lot of times it's a me thing deep down inside of this business issue. And so being able to talk with other peers like that is so important. And as much as, I love rapping about business with her and talking strategy and all that, she needed to have her own place to go. And so, yeah, timing couldn't have been better with you putting this program together. And she has gotten so much out of it along the way. So I'm just thrilled that it all came together the way it did.
Me too. Me too. That was one of the greatest conversations she and I had because we had known each other in kind of in a past life and had just reunited. And when I was telling her about this program, she said, I'm in. Like, I think I'm in. And I said, well, that was a quick yes. And she said, no, really. She said, one of the first conversations Tim and I had, he basically gave me the directive to find my people. And I thought, man, I got to meet this guy. That's super cool.
Well,
Well,
it's probably a big letdown, but here I am.
but you know what? It's becoming more of a leadership characteristic that people embrace to have this sense of community. But I would say, I've been in the business world for, I don't know, 3 decades now. It's a fairly new concept over the past 10 years that people would use community building intentionally. It's becoming more of a conversation, but there was a day when that wasn't even talked about.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think about even say 12, 15 years ago, I got involved with a probably to the 90th percentile, maybe the 95th percentile, talked about stuff in town, whatever, but it always wasn't perfectly safe. I might have had some of my people at Gibson might have been out working on their accounts. So I couldn't really go that last little bit because they're clients and everything. So when I got involved with YPO, Young Presidents Organization, it took a few months to get our group really tight and really willing to share. And it always takes some brave soul to go deeper than anybody else did. And then you're like, wow, okay, what I was afraid to share, I can definitely share. And I find with so much of that too, again, so many things go back to my like personal life stuff and how it impacts the business side of things. But to your point, the second thing I think, and I guess I didn't know how to articulate it, but Simon Sinek's with the infinite game, and it's this abundance thing, and it's about, do you really have competitors? No. You might have some worthy rivals that you can learn from, you can study, you can emulate. You don't have to emulate 100% of what they're doing either, because some things may not fit or may not work. You can all get better, expand the pie, and everybody can win. Not just a few people, not just a little bit. So this idea of winner take all versus we can all get better, I think is a huge shift coming out there. And people that miss it are going to be playing, as he says, finite games. And there's an end, and someday it's over. versus that playing on an infinite level, all your decisions long term, long game. And you never lose as long as you keep playing. As long as you don't quit the game, you haven't lost yet. You're just working on it still. So I think that fits right back into what you said about establishing community, and not being threatened by, geez, what if one of your competitors in town maybe is even in one of your groups? Is that the worst thing in the world? I mean, most of us are in the nuclear science business. And so is what we're doing really that special or secretive? It's really about execution and doing it well. So those groups are just fantastic. And when they're done right and ran well and people get open and honest, they're just magical.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. I often tell the story because I'm all about stories. That's one of the key tenets of us here and my process for consulting and coaching. But I often tell the story when I was with the Franklin Covey organization, I was a badass salesperson. I sold $35 million. Like I did all the things. But what people will tell you that they remember me for is my willingness to be vulnerable and share my story. I can remember standing up in front of a sales team in California. They asked me to come in and share best practices about my results. But what they'll tell you they remember is the day I stood there and said, you know, we're all a little afraid, right? We're afraid this is the year that we get found out. This is the year that we can't pull it together. Like this is the year it all falls apart. And I remember this like hush silence across the room. And all of a sudden I realized I'd kind of just shared all my inner secrets. But to me, they weren't really secrets. And then I saw people just light up. All of a sudden, then the questions started to pour in. Really? You're afraid too? Okay, what do we do about that? And that is a key moment in my career that I will remember more than the box of glass awards that are now in my storage closet.
Rebecca, I can totally relate to that. There are a lot of similarities that way. I started as a sales jockey as well, and ultimately realized how much I enjoyed the leadership side of things. In 2015, I published a book called Our Evolution. And in that, I mean, it was kind of a therapeutic thing for me. And it was also a chance to capture some of our history at Gibson. And then for me, it was like the best accountability partner I could have, because I basically am out there in front of everybody and told them that they should expect me. And so it's there, it's in print. And every now and then I'll get some of our team that'll remind me of, hey, remember how you said you were going to, do this a little better? And there's a page in the book for that. But I can remember before we final published it, talking with my partners at Gibson, and a few of them had some real concerns like, oh my goodness, how can we possibly put this out there? I mean, they're going to think we're, nuts and all the crazy stuff going on. And they're going to think less of us and might not want to work with us. And my predecessor, Greg Downs, who's involved still in our board, was like, are you kidding me? He's like, I've been around a little longer than a lot of you, and every single one of our clients has all the same crap going on. And I think they'll like us better. I think that they'll appreciate us more and by being authentic like that and making it something we can share. And so we went forward with everything and let out all the gory details out. And he was right. He was right. It turned out that way.
Well, it reminds me of the Domino's story. Remember when they came out with a huge marketing campaign? I think it was a Super Bowl campaign, and basically said, our pizza sucks. And there's a whole backstory where the VP of marketing and the CEO talk about what a huge risk that was for them. But to me, vulnerability and telling the real story is the most courageous move you can make. So to me, courage isn't about I climbed the mountain. It's about I was willing to tell you the truth. And that connects us. That's because everybody has some story some struggle. And if we connect based on those things, that's authenticity and vulnerability and all the stuff that we ultimately want.
Yeah, the item that probably got them more. I'd been at Gibson a couple of years, came into the stockholder group, and I, being one of those sales jockeys like you, and you might have been better at this than me, but I was pretty good with math because you got to count commissions and sales and all that. But I was not an accounting pro by any means. And although, Gibson supplied all of our valuation information, so I knew what I was getting into, I really didn't put much effort into it. I was just so happy to become an owner in something. So got in and realized that we were in really, really rough shape. So this was about 2007. So the recession hadn't even hit yet. And I'd watched Jerry Maguire one too many times, I think. And so I put a mission statement. I put a letter together to all my stockholder partners and really called us out about 10 or 12 things, and kind of dropped that bomb. And then my wife and I went to New York City to celebrate our 10th anniversary. And I'd talked to a lot of the stockholders beforehand, so I thought I had all this rousing support behind me. And I hit send on the BlackBerry before I hopped on the plane. We landed in New York, and I thought I would hear the cheers of the crowds, to the conquering hero. And everybody's so thankful for all the things I pointed out. And it was absolute crickets. And about 30 minutes into this, my wife's like, "Are you going to get fired?" I'm like, "Yeah, Mom, maybe." I don't really know, because this isn't what I thought. I thought we'd all agreed on the coup d'etat, and anyway, it created this whole bomb that kind of blew up internally. And we brought some outside professionals in to help us sort through all this and figure out succession and a whole number of things. And again, I remember at least half the crap you wrote in there, but you're the only one who's ever really stood up to me and dropped it out there and put it out there. And so for that, I'm grateful. And it forced a lot of these issues up that we hadn't been dealing with, and we're going to deal with them now. And so that was one of the things in the book, actually, but it's kind of embarrassing too. That first day or so is very uncomfortable for me.
Well, and that is the thing. There is some embarrassing moments in being authentic, right? It's standing, I call it the sea of uncertainty, right? That 30 minutes between landing and hearing nothing is that just standing in there waiting for what's the response going to be. And people want to talk about, vulnerability and authenticity like it's some airy fairy woo thing. But to me, it's the most gritty thing that you can possibly, if you can be resilient enough to stand there in that 30 minutes of holy shit, I might get fired. Like that's the most courageous move of all. Like that's big. Because the alternative is what they were saying is I was never vulnerable and authentic enough to say it. And the fact that now you've said it, now we've got to deal with it. Like that's important.
Hey, so as a fan of your podcast here, can I turn the tables and ask you, what's what's an embarrassing moment that you lived through in your career?
I fell down in front of a class I was teaching one time. Does that count?
I mean, it's decent. That's a start.
There's been so many. I have said, honestly, and I think one of the things I'm most proud of is I'm okay with that now. I mean, early in my career, like you, I was more about connection and helping and serving. I wasn't a math genius. I wasn't a P&L genius, but I'd learned, right? I was running a P&L. I learned the business as much as I possibly could. But when I would walk into a CEO's office, what I was really thinking was, I'm a small town girl that grew up in a mobile home on an acre of land on my grandfather's farm. And what the hell am I doing here right now? And that sense of just standing in that fear of what if they think I'm an idiot, and pushing through it and just being curious about other people's business and connecting with them. Ultimately, I got to the point where I realized that my small town girl roots, growing up on a small farm with all boys, was really a key advantage for me, because I can speak now after 30 years in business. I can kind of speak anybody's language. I can go in the boardroom and talk that stuff ish, but I can also talk with the guys on the front line. But in the beginning, I said dumb stuff. I asked stupid questions. I saw them give me the look like, who does she think she is? And I just pushed through it. I think I can think of a million embarrassing questions that I asked to a CEO or to somebody in a meeting. You get in your car and you're like, that's it. It's over. This is where it all ends, because that was the dumbest thing I've ever said. But it all worked out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel the same way growing up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and then going to college at Indiana State and Terre Haute. And yeah, just a lot of things. It wasn't purposely in a bubble. It's just what it was. And so when my wife and I moved out to Arizona a couple years after college and in Scottsdale, and some of those early dinner parties with senior partners out there, just the number of times I put my foot in my mouth of all kinds of things that I just didn't know that that wasn't appropriate, or that's not how other folks say that, or here's questions you should ask or not, or whatever. And really appreciative though during those years too. Some of the couples there in the office kind of took us under their wing and put us through a little bit of finishing school, and we're so gracious about it too. And it actually sticks with me today. It's one of those things I try to think about, or when I notice some of our younger folks pulling them aside, and it's like there'll be a time to be a complete individual, and at some point you'll circle back and you'll say all those things again that you said early on, but you'll do it purposefully. And then in the meantime, you got to be a little bit of a chameleon and integrate with everyone. And I will say this too: this Indiana State's one of those things. It's it's where I met Courtney there. We weren't great pals or anything, but had a lot of mutual friends would show up at some of the same parties. And we have Notre Dame grads, and we've got grads from great schools that work at Gibson. But we have a ton of Sycamores. We have a lot of All-State Cardinals and so on. But what I love about some of those places and schools is kind of like your story. If you dig in a little bit, like Courtney, most of them grew up, and it wasn't, maybe they had a bad life, but it wasn't easy, or they were working hard, whether it was on the farm or mom or dad's business. And they're just kind of grinders, and they're just as smart. Maybe on the surface, the diploma doesn't stand out quite the same, but they're just real people. And I mean, Courtney's the epitome of that too. Of she's got all the savvy and everything, like you were talking about. Can talk to boards, CEOs, you name it, but can roll up her shirt sleeves and get dirty and get up in it and get stuff done. And it's awesome having running partners like that.
It is. I love that she did a podcast that talked about how curiosity really helped her shape her career. And she and I have bonded over that several times, because when I was in those uncomfortable moments, standing in that space of a client meeting, I always just leaned on my curiosity. I did not have the traditional education experience. I didn't go to college until later. And I was just curious about their businesses. And the more I was curious and asked about them, the more connection we could make. And oftentimes then I'd go find a book or something that would teach me more about it. I know you're a big reader and as well. And now we've got podcasts and all kinds of ways that you can go get information if you didn't have the traditional education experience. And I think that's where if we're curious enough about ourselves and others, it will go a long way in closing the gap in what we don't know in the moment.
You're right, and people appreciate that anymore. I mean, some of those diplomas maybe get you an initial leg up or a foot in the door kind of thing, but all of it's what you do with it and where you take it and what you put into it. And that goes for work too. I mean, you're doing what you're doing in Indianapolis, great place. I look at that and I spend most of my time working out of South Bend. I visit our office in Courtney and Indy, but so we're a small place compared to Indianapolis. But then again, your peers out there, I'm like, Indianapolis. I mean, you're not in New York or San Francisco, Rebecca. How could your podcast be any good? But that doesn't matter, right? It's those relationships and asking the questions and everything.
Yeah. And I love the mid-market city size. There's lots of opportunity in cities like Indianapolis to really elevate brands like Courtney, who is doing amazing things. So I love that ability to just in a few episodes and like Rise and Thrive, that Stand Tall in Your Story event, all of a sudden, Courtney says she's walking into rooms and people know her and about her story, and that lights me up. I love that.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing. I feel the same way, from a client standpoint. I haven't been real directly involved with clients probably for 4 or 5 years, but I just absolutely enjoyed that part of being in places like Indiana and Michigan and so on, because get to sit across the table from the business owner, CEO, the founder, whatever, and just have real conversations with people and understand their business better. Real human beings facing all the same kind of issues, challenges, whatever, and those kind of relationships are just fantastic on that. It is interesting though, and you'll appreciate this being a salesperson and our egos and so on that go with that. You're the salesperson. You won the account. It's your account and all this. And when I'd go out and visit these clients, and it still happens today, one of my partners who's running it, it's their relationship. When I'm sitting down talking with these folks, though, they don't mention Tim, they don't mention Courtney, they don't mention Bob, they don't mention Art, they don't mention Liz. The people they tend to talk about, though, Rebecca, are like our safety people, and it's really cool. We have a safety engineering staff, 6-7 people that we're out on the front lines, working with our clients preemptively, proactively, so that hopefully, being in the risk management business like we are, hopefully they don't have the workers' comp injury to begin with. I mean, sure, we'll go get you some, cheaper insurance. That's fine, but why don't we actually fix the problem? Mm-hmm. And that's the cool. If you're out there and you hear these CFOs, CEOs, HR directors talk about, well, Hillary was out here last week, or Shauna was out here last week, or Gary was out here last week. And I mean, they become like the fabric of these clients of ours. They're really almost like they work there. And so it's a little bit, we got to check their egos at our door, but I love coming back and sending an email to those people and also copying the partner on it and saying, hey, the client couldn't say enough good things about you. Oh, they said, hi, Bob.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, because that is where the real work happens. That's where you do start to contextually weave what you do in with what the client does. And it's so important that our whole team knows the story of the client and the story of what you're trying to accomplish. And I will tell you, this is funny. When Courtney first said, hey, I'm going to work for Gibson Insurance, I was like, crickets. I was like, Courtney, big personality, vivacious, out there, just effervescent, if you will. And I'm thinking, Courtney Insurance. Like, I couldn't make the connection, right? And because I had never really been involved in your industry and knew much about it. And then you hear her start to tell the stories of the impact that you're having with these businesses, because you're able to look out into the future a little bit and forecast some things that you can do to help manage their business in a really meaningful way that gets down to the daily lives of the employees. And I was literally on the edge of my seat one day. We were just sitting having coffee, and I was like, this is the story, right? This is what people need to understand about your industry and about Gibson specifically, is you're changing lives literally with the way that you're partnering with your clients. And that's not hyperbole or hype. Like, those are real stories. I'd love for you to share one or two of the stories of the ways that you've been able to do that with clients.
Yeah, and again, being a fan of your show, I've listened to Courtney's, and she talked a lot about from a healthcare standpoint, and so individual employee lives and so on. I'll share maybe from a business standpoint. One of our clients is a restaurant group, and a couple of years ago we had some bad tornadoes, and so their Kokomo store, little town between South Bend and Indianapolis, got blasted. And they locally, they at the store level, they had not done a great job of some of the keeping all the books updated, some of the financial pieces and components. So they're filing what we call a business interruption claims. The restaurant shut down, and not only is it costing them loads of money every single day, you got a ton of waiters, wait staff, GMs of the restaurant, that the restaurant's not open, there is no work. And you just think about all those families and the impact. And then in smaller towns, a restaurant's kind of an important place. It's where everybody goes. It's where the kids want to go after the ball game and all that. So there's all kinds of little things that are impacted. And, our job was to help get them up and running as fast as possible. So yes, we're an insurance agency, but some of our people, like Courtney, have these really interesting backgrounds. We've got some CPAs on staff. And so maybe it wasn't on the brochure when they bought from us of why to buy from us, but one of our CPAs that's an insurance professional now actually went through and did all the forensic accounting to rebuild all the books and the revenue to be able to prove the case to the insurance carrier. And we're on that stuff like dogs, going after that for them, and got their claim paid, got the check fast. So that's the second thing. Sometimes you can get the carrier to pay the claim, but if the money doesn't come quickly, it doesn't matter. And we were able to take something that was an absolute disaster that started with a weather event that really was a internal operational issue with the accounting, the books, and get them back on their feet in a matter of days. And so when I bump into their CEO, that's the first thing out of her mouth is, and it's interesting. She used to be the CFO. She's the CEO now, and I used to work on the account with her, and so we have a lot of CEO conversations now. And she's like, Tim, I just can't thank you enough. And she'd name our people and what they did and how we got back on our feet. But I know it's 3 levels down: the waiter, the person at the front desk, the kid that got to go have his favorite meal. And that's the kind of stuff we're kind of behind the scenes, in the insurance biz, but that's how it should be. But these are the kind of differences that we make in individual lives.
That's the kind of stuff that gives me chills. Like, that's humanity. Like you said, you're picturing, the kid who wants to go to his favorite restaurant after the football game. You're picturing the server who needs the job. Like, that's the stuff of business. And I'm excited about the future because I feel this shift in business having more of a humanity conversation, because business is really about money that fuels our stories. I mean, if you really just boil it down to the basics, money is what fuels all of our stories. And that's a perfect example of being that kind of partner. And I would shift your language to say, it's not about you being behind the scenes. I really do see now, working with Courtney closely, that you're going up ahead, right? You're going up ahead of the business and saying, hey, here's what could be happening in the future. And we want to make sure you're prepared for it, and that we're going to partner with you to get you through whatever happens. Like, that's a beautiful thing.
Well, you are, able to see the future yourself, because we are actually working right now with one of my YPO friends, Tiffany Souter. She runs, I think, the biggest marketing branding shop in Indiana, out of Indianapolis. They're called Element 3. And it's, we kind of, we have that language I just used with you, and you're on it. She and her team have told us the same thing. Like, you're providing this edge for people in their business, and you're giving them this sight line into the future and how things are going to work. And sure, you're there to pick up the pieces when things don't work out right. But you all got to talk more about what you do and tell better stories. I think a lot of our team coming out of that risk management world, that's not who they naturally are. They're there to work hard and get things done. So it's great having actually somebody like Courtney who can tell stories so well, to get out there and be on the front lines talking about it and articulating what it is we do and that difference that we make. So I appreciate that, and I'll let the marketing folks know that you just intuitively know this stuff.
Well, and it's Hoosier humility married with just tell the story. It doesn't mean we're bragging, right? Many of us were raised in these small town, families where you didn't show up at the dinner table going, hey, guess what great thing I did today? And so there's this great humility about the Midwest culture that sometimes it's hard for us to raise our hand and say, hey, I've got this great story about how we've really done great work in our business. And that's a good thing. That's important for us to be able to get that message out, because I think when I think about insurance being courageous, those two words don't actually naturally come to my brain, right? And so it's up to y'all to tell that story, that you are courageously going out front and making sure that businesses can stay operational through whatever storms, literally or figuratively, happen, right?
It really is. We just had this conversation internally a couple of weeks ago, and it goes back to all these relationships. It goes back to that early CEO group that I was in, and one of my fellow CEOs. We had one of our young people working on his business. And, we botched a few things up at open enrollment right around the first of the year and got them fixed and so on. As we dug into it, actually, you just talked about is this younger person on my team, and with that Hoosier idea of serving the client, I better not get too strong with them and tell them. Well, the other CEO and I talked about this, and it's a coaching opportunity for my person. Actually, clients need you to be courageous. They need you to give them the tough stuff they don't want to hear. They need you to tell them that no, that timeline you want to be on to make it really easy, because whatever senior officer does his or her vacation always at Thanksgiving, so we need to push back open enrollment to another date or whatever. That's not going to work. It's going to be bad for your people, and I'm not going to let you do it, because that's not the best way to get the job done. And instead, we need to come up with a different solution. And so, yeah, that infusing courage into business and being able to speak up and be strong. And I think that's, I think Courtney is somebody that's probably naturally, or she's learned it over time, or a combination of both. But I think what you're doing and with Rise and Thrive is adding a lot of that out there, and help my little example or bigger ones like that, having the guts to tell people what they need to hear and being okay with it. I tell my friends a lot too that I sometimes have to remind them, I'm the friend that's going to tell you that you've got the booger in your nose, and I'll try to stand in front of you while you fix it so nobody sees it. I don't care. I have it too, and I want you to tell me when I have it. But why would I let you go through life with that, the booger hanging out of your nose? And I feel like, when you really learn and get down to it, that's the best part. My wife and I learned that when we moved out to Scottsdale. Arizona is such a melting pot. So we'd never been around anybody except some Midwestern types. We're out there, and people from New York and Philadelphia and even Chicago and so on moved into our same neighborhood, a bunch of younger couples. And I remember going out to dinner with one of them, Jim and Noel, and he's from Long Island, she's from Queens. And we're sitting there at dinner, and Noel's like, and is it okay to swear on this show?
Yes.
It's preferred, I think. I don't know. And I'm only quoting here, so it's for effect. But she said, "That's a fucking ugly shirt." And my wife, I thought I was about to spit her wine out, and I didn't know whether to melt or what. And as we got to know them, though, I realized I always would tell her about that day, and I tell other people about that day. She just thought my shirt was ugly. It had nothing to do with how she felt about me. And we actually really appreciated those years that we lived out there and rubbing shoulders with people like that. Just people that we weren't around growing up, because it's a whole new way of looking at things, and that honesty that you would get. I mean, I always knew where I stood with Jim and Noel, never questioned it. And I'd like to think too that over time we wore off on them a little bit. My wife, because this is how we were taught to do the first couple of days in the neighborhood, she took a plate of cookies over to Noel one night. And I remember her telling me, Noel looked at me like, again, a WTF moment. And are there razor blades in those?
I was going to say, are you poisoning me?
And we followed that one up with about 2 nights later, I think they realized, okay, we got these Midwestern weirdos. We have to be nice back. So I think she came over with a bottle of wine. And it's really, really hot in Phoenix. It was the middle of the summer. And I'd gotten home from work before my wife. And as was my habit, I was getting used to the climate. I stripped down to just, underwear basically. And the doorbell rang, and I thought for sure it was Kim. And I just opened up the door in my underwear. So we followed up the cookies with razor blades. 2 days later, I'm sitting in white boxer shorts and a white t-shirt. And again, this look of WTF on her face. She hands me the bottle of wine and walks across the street. But we became just great friends with them, still friends. We moved back here in New York City about the same time. But
I love that. And that's the shirt thing makes me think that in the Midwest, what would have happened is we would have gone and told somebody else that your shirt was fucking ugly. We wouldn't have never told you that, right? We would have went and told two or
Right.
three other people that you wore an awful shirt. So I love the just honesty of being like, dude, no. Oh, that's awesome. And you know, you can tie that back to business. I can think of the best relationships that I have with business colleagues and clients is when I made a mistake and I just flat out would call them up and go, "Man, I screwed this up. And here's how I'm going to fix it." And being able to, you know, it's the same as just saying your shirt's ugly, right? It's I screwed up, here's how I'm going to fix it. Those relationships became stronger than the ones where you fake it till you make it.
Yeah, that trust that you have in there, fall on the sword, call it what it is. Just say, hey, I'm not going to get the project done this weekend because, you know what, I've been humping it hard last few weeks and I want to spend time with my kid or my spouse or whatever it is I want to do. I'm not going to get it done. That Tiffany Souter I mentioned, she's on our board at Gibson, and we had a state of the company, kind of our annual company meeting. And so she and I did a little fireside chat, kind of like this, except live in front of everybody. And she talked about that as well. Like when she got more comfortable in her skin to be able to tell her team, she always felt like she had to be the one showing it, demonstrating it, proving it. I think she realized she still had to be that. She needed to do it in a different way. So her husband, great guy too. They both have big time careers. They got kids. They got all that stuff. And she had to get to that point, as she told all of our team, that I need to just be an example, actually, in a different way to my company, that it's okay, and there's other people there to pick up the slack. Yeah, we're still going to come through for our clients, and sometimes we need to call the clients and just tell them the same thing too. But it's okay to take a breath once in a while, or do what you need to do. Put your oxygen mask on first, whatever it is, to get through.
And it's so easy for me to go on an education rant, and I'm not going to do it today because we don't have time. But when you spend the first 12 to 16 years of your life not being honored by telling the truth, and mistakes aren't honored, and you got to raise your hand first, and all the things that we do in our education system, we got to unwind a lot of that stuff to really be ourselves when we get to work. So I'm grateful for companies like you that are allowing people to show up and be their authentic selves with all of their mistakes and grittiness, and that's okay.
Well, Rebecca, I was probably was nice enough on the outside, but when I was in my early mid 20s, and I've always been a hard worker and a grinder, and so both from a age and gender standpoint, and I would look at some of my the older guys I work with in sales, and if I was 25, they might have been 45, and I'd from Phoenix to Albuquerque and go over there and call in a bunch of people. We were opening up the New Mexico market, and I mean, I'd get on a Southwest Airlines flight at 6 a.m, and I'd be damn proud of coming back on the 8 o'clock flight. And they were running about every hour, and I'd smash 6 meetings in there. Well, looking back on it, I mean, I was so burnt out with my family and everything. I can barely remember the first couple of years of my second son. The first one, I wasn't quite there yet. And the second one, though, my wife will tell me stories, and I'm like, I was in just a haze at that point in time. But I would look at like disgust of what a wuss. That guy's going over there the night before, getting a hotel. He's only going to have 4 meetings. It's awful. And I get hotels the night before now, and I do those things because I realize, like, one, your energy level is different, but two, though, like being fresh and doing all those things, and then also like they were smart. They were going over there because there's a great restaurant in Santa Fe they wanted to go to the night before, right? It's like, oh yeah, now I get it. And I think I felt that way too about some of my female peers and colleagues too. Maybe it would be when they're off on maternity leave, and I just think about the work that was going to cause me and all that. And that's been the cool part at Gibson. Got 5 of my partners are females. We're all pretty similar in age, families, kids, whatever. And so really appreciating all the things that they go through to show up every day. And it's amazing. I mean, I just I don't know if it's naturally wired into women, but there's less selfishness, or maybe it's more communal or something that most males are not naturally wired to. And I have to try hard to not be that, to be that way. But there's just this, I'm going to take care of the whole village type of thing. And man, I know when I get home at night, like I'm done. Then I'm done. My battery runs out about 9:45, and that's it. And they're still going. And so great. It's just over the years. I've been at Gibson since 2005, and so just working alongside all these people, it's just like our friends in New York. It just opens up your eyes to more, and you see things from a totally different vantage point.
I love that you said that. And it's okay that men and women are different. Like we should be different, right? And it's acknowledging the complementary nature of that. One of the stats that really led me to take my business in the direction of high achieving women, because I love that idea of community and ripple effect, is when they studied men and women executive leaders and asked them what motivated them to be in executive leadership, and there were like 10 different things. For women, the idea of being a role model was like 47% of the driver, whereas for men it was less than 20, which isn't right or wrong, it just
Wow,
is.
yeah, that's
But
interesting.
the way that I look at it is, when I pour into a high achieving woman, she can't help but share it. And so I feel like I've got this return on investment of my time that has this amazing network effect, because they're going to take what they've learned from our group and really spread that love and learning around. And I dig that.
Yeah, Courtney's done such a great job with that, being our chief growth officer, which has kind of bigger picture sales vision kind of stuff with it, growth strategies, but it also has classic sales management, which you would appreciate too. And I mean, I've been the coach in the locker room for a long time, and at some point in time, it's good to have a change of coach. Period, no matter what their philosophies or styles are. But there's been so many times, or just even this last year, where I just have just run out of patience on some of those things, and I'm sure our people have run out of patience with me, and I would have handled it in a different way. It's like, hey, I got this. Like, okay. And then I get feedback though from my partners back on this, that some of these very same people that I've had my way of doing it with them, and they're not, I'm not gonna say afraid. They're not unafraid of Courtney by any means. They're like, hey, Tim, I just want to know, Courtney's been all over me on this, and like we're gonna get this done on time, I promise. And so, but it's being done in a much more supportive way, and so it's good. It's good. That's what just kind of getting everybody and thriving, I think, is the language you use. But if you do this right, we can all be thriving. And you don't. It shouldn't. If it feels like a complete grind all the time, something's not right.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that you're honoring each of their uniqueness, all the way back to the restaurant story where you use that CPA experience in that role, and not just seeing people in the box that they are in the org chart, but who are they as a unique individual. That's the good stuff. That's the good stuff. Hey, I want you to come back with Courtney, and I would love to facilitate that conversation about how you two are working together to complement each other, in the fact that you're very different, but all aligned to drive the Gibson story. You up for a replay on the podcast? You can have like two spots as the third male guest on
Wow.
the show. Wow.
Well, I kind of see that as it's kind of like Saturday Night Live. I was the first male to host multiple times with you or be a guest, so I like that. No, that would actually be a lot of fun, and maybe we should do it at 4 o'clock someday, and toast a glass or something like that. And then between now and then, she and I will talk a little bit and see how much of our dirty laundry we're willing to put out there together. So we are really clicking, but we had a couple of times where we butted heads pretty bad, but came out of it even better on the back end. So we'll get our courage.
Yes, to all of those things. Yes, absolutely. Hey, thanks so much for doing what you're doing, for your leadership, for being a great supporter of mine in this venture that I'm on. It's a pleasure to get to know you and your story. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, and you as well. Thank you, and good luck as you keep taking this show on the road to more places. I think it'll be great.
Thanks so much.